Greetings metalheads and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George and today I have another installment of Heavy Relics for you where I will be showing you a whole host in different formats, different albums, different releases from one of the true legendary pioneering death metal bands, certainly the pioneers and one of the instigators, one of the godfathers if you like, of what has become brutal death metal and slamming death metal. I am, of course, talking about the legendary Suffocation. And as I say, I've got a whole host of stuff actually from a few different sites, some of it being from the Nuclear Blast Records web store, some of it from the Listenable Records web store as well, and from a few other places as well, kind of like in between. But I'll take you through these articles then. As I mentioned, Suffocation. A legendary band, a pioneering band, hugely influential, a US band from I think they're from the sort of New York area. Absolute legends. A band that I have been aware of for many years, of course. However, I never really gotten into them properly. I was sort of dipping in and out different bits and pieces. Many years ago, I was very into their first early sort of 3 albums. Those, I guess that's quite an unholy trinity of brutal death metal albums. Very, very important stuff. And then kind of left it, came back to them a few years later, really enjoyed the Pinnacle of Bedlam, left it. So I did have a few albums. And then, however many years ago now, for whatever reason, I was culling the collection a bit and I got rid of them. I think I had 4 of their albums and I sold them. I don't think my mental health was very good at the time, and for whatever reason, I thought that was a good decision to make. And I regretted it, and I still do regret it. But I have subsequently collected different pieces in different forms. So, as I was showing there, that is the cover of their most recent live album. This is live in North America. Of course, I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because if you are interested, I have recently done a Live Killers special episode just on this album, on the strength that this is such a freaking good live album. This is the double vinyl, and if you haven't seen that, I will just briefly show off the fact that this lovely double album is also golden. It's a golden disc. Beautiful stuff for a golden live album. And I would honestly say this is a freaking crushing death metal live album. This shows a band in fine form. Of course, this was the final show of their tenure with Frank Mullen, vocalist, legendary brutal death metal vocalist that he is. This was his final tour. I think this was his final show, in fact, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it's freaking great. Some amazing material there. But as I say, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of depth there. But just for the sake of this Heavy Relics, we've got the CD. We have the double vinyl as well. And we've also got a cassette, which I just couldn't resist picking up when I saw it. I think this was on the Nuclear Blast Records web store. Sort of like a grey, smoky effect to that case there. Really cool. Really neat little thing to have, and I have listened to it in all 3 formats, and it does sound great. I absolutely love it. But we're gonna go back in time now. So one of the first releases from the band was actually an EP that has been reissued and kind of embellished over the years. I'm talking about Human Waste. Now that is a great cover. There's no doubt about that at all. That is a great cover. Originally released in 1991, this EP features some material it is real old school death metal, really raw stuff. It's interesting because all of these tracks, other than Human Waste, I believe, I'm not entirely sure if that does reappear, but all of these other tracks appear on later albums, or EPs in fact, such as Infecting the Crypts, Mass Obliteration, and Jesus Wept. Of course, they appear on the first album, Effigies of the Forgotten. Then we've got Catatonia, which reappears on Despise the Sun. We've got Synthetically Revived, which appears on Pierced From Within. And on this version, you've also got some previously unreleased tracks from the Reincarnation demo from 1990. Hopefully you can see that. So what would I say about this? I would say this is proper old school death metal. This is very much, it's brutal, absolutely. This is really neck and neck with what we've got from the likes of Cannibal Corpse. We've got some seriously, the more extreme end, the brutal end of death metal, old school death metal at this time. Almost kind of on par with bands like Deicide as well. This is heavy. This is old school. It's got that very, I don't want to say generic, but it's very much got that feel of US death metal from the early scene. Absolutely brilliant though. I really do enjoy this, even though I prefer the album versions of these particular tracks. This is really cool, and this is something that I had not heard until I picked up this copy for about £5, I think it was, on eBay recently, new and sealed. This is a great one. This is really enjoyable. If you're a Suffocation diehard fan, then I'm sure that you've probably heard this. But if you're a fan of Cannibal Corpse, if you're a fan of Deicide, Morbid Angel, any of those kind of bands, check this out. Because if you like those bands, you're definitely going to like this. This is heavy, it's extreme. Frank's very youthful death growls they're still top notch. Musicianship's good. You know, it does have that kind of demo feel about it. But I would say Human Waste is a really enjoyable EP. Absolutely. So we're going to keep this chronological then. So we've had our Human Waste EP. So now we're going to go on to the debut album, which I have here in this beautiful vinyl form. And I have to say, I love this album. I absolutely love this album. This was released in 1991 as well, of course. And I will show in this particular format the disc is this stunning electric blue, absolutely gorgeous, so nice, really does look the part. So we've got a lovely vinyl, we've got some awesome and very iconic artwork as well there. We know who that is. Even if you took away the font, took away the title, that's instantly recognisable. Suffocation, Effigies of the Forgotten, the debut album that kind of was the catalyst. This album is definitely the catalyst for what has become brutal death metal and slamming brutal death metal. Certainly with the crushing, massive grooves that are contained within tracks such as Liege of Inveracity, Effigy of the Forgotten, Mass Obliteration, Involuntary Slaughter. Absolutely crushing. The riffs are groovy and just pummeling. And this is a really youthful band, but they are incredibly talented musicians as well. There is no taking that away from these guys. We have here the lineup on this nice inserts. We've got the lyrics on one side. We've got the shot of the band there. So in this lineup, we've got Frank Mullen, who sounds fantastic. He sounds like a monster. He's right up there with, you know, George Fisher, with Glenn Benton. He's right up there with those guys, in my opinion. We've got Terence Hobbs, and we've got Doug Cerrito on guitars. We've got Josh Barron on bass, and we've got Mike Smith on drums. So that's kind of the legendary lineup. A lot of Suffocation fans cite this as being kind of the golden era of Suffocation, and I can absolutely understand why, because Effigies of the Forgotten is an absolute classic. If you've not heard this album, maybe you've been put off by the fact that it's cited as being such a hugely influential album, but also a very important brutal death metal album. Have no fear, this album is absolutely essential. This is just as important as Tomb of the Mutilated or Legion, just as important as any of those albums. Absolutely crushing stuff. Love this album, start to finish. Particular highlights, I would say Liege of Inveracity, that opening track, Infecting the Crypts, which we have in that earlier form as well on Human Waste, Reincarnation, and Jesus Wept. Personal highlights on this album for me. Just start to finish though. It has such a seamless flow. You just put the album on and you just headbang and death growl away like a maniac too. Absolutely love it. Effigies of the Forgotten. And because just having vinyl is not enough, recently we have had reissues on cassette from Listenable Records, and these are really high quality issues. Particularly love the fact that on the cassette itself we have artwork on the tape shell. So freaking cool. And the insert is really high quality. We've got proper nice insert as well. We've got photographs, I should say. We've got the artwork. We've also got all the lyrics as well. So this isn't some sort of cheap, tacky reissue. This is the real freaking deal. Absolutely stunning stuff there. So we'll keep chronologically. I've recently shown off in a Heavy Relics episode where I had a little bunch of death metal vinyls. I've shown a vinyl copy, which is also blue, of the second album, Breeding the Spawn. Now I've got it on tape as well. And again, it looks awesome on the tape shell. We've got the artwork there. Really cool stuff. Really awesome. Love it. And again, it's a really nice booklet. This album gets a lot of criticism. The band weren't particularly happy with the production. I don't believe that the production was handled quite the way that they wanted it to be, and consequently it does suffer quite badly in terms of its sound. However, I don't think it sounds nearly as bad as what a lot of people make it out to be. I think that this does have some cracking material on it, some absolutely brilliant tracks. Particularly Beginning of Sorrow, the opening track, Breeding the Spawn, Marital Decimation, Anomalistic Offerings. These are brilliant tracks. Absolutely brilliant, crushing old school death metal. No, I wouldn't say that this is better than Effigies of the Forgotten, but it's not far off. It's just as good, or nearly just as good. Breeding the Spawn's a fine album, and I think that what will happen in time, and I think it's already kind of happening really, is that this album will be looked at in a different light by fans, maybe people who have written it off, or they've read or heard that it doesn't sound that great. The production is a bit muffled, it is a bit dull, is a bit kind of damp. It's not as in your face and brutal as Effigies of the Forgotten, but there is a reason why this album in particular, Effigies of the Forgotten, sounds the way that it does. And I probably should have actually mentioned that if I get that insert. This album was produced by Scott Burns and Suffocation, mixed by Scott Burns, and recorded at Morrisound Studio, Tampa, Florida. So if you're familiar with Morrisound Studios, and of course Scott Burns, you'll be aware that that guy, he had the golden touch, but he also produced a lot of albums, recorded a lot of albums, such as Slowly We Rot, Death, Scream, Bloody Gore. We've had, there was countless albums. Of course, you know, Altars of Badness, Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse albums, Eaten Back to Life, so on. They all have a very similar sound. So, Effigies of the Forgotten, it does have that US death metal kind of Florida sound to it, the Morrisound Studios sound. This doesn't. It was recorded elsewhere. This is why it kind of stands out as a little bit of different, a bit of an individual in that early death metal scene, US death metal scene. But I think that it will be viewed in a different light as years go on. Even though it's not great production, it's not that bad. So, Breeding the Spawn, a good album, definitely a good one. So let's go to the third album now then. This is Pierced From Within. Now this is actually an album that I am new to, because I never heard this the first kind of time around, if you like, the first time that I started to get into Suffocation. I didn't hear this one. Reason being is that if you wanted a CD copy of this album, you really did have to pay above the odds. For some unknown reason, it was a really expensive album CD to get hold of. Just show that. Nice kind of yellow, radiant yellow disc there. Really cool. So because of the price, I didn't hear it until purchasing this particular vinyl. This was from Listenable Records as well, from their website. Originally released in 1995. This is a cracking death metal album. I would not say it's as groovy as Effigy of the Forgotten, but the sound and I would say the overall kind of production is miles better than Breeding the Spawn. This is a brutal death metal album. It's not so heavy on the grooves and the kind of the slam elements, if you like. There's a little bit more technicality, but we've got some bulldozing death metal tracks. Of course, I'll just show the lineup here. We've got a few changes by this point. On the insert, we've got our lyrics again, and we've also got the band. So we've got Doug on guitars, we've got Terence Hobbs on guitar as well, we've got Frank on vocals, we've got Doug on drums, and Chris on bass. So we've had a little lineup change there, but this album crushes. This is an absolute bulldozing album. Pierced from Within, the title track, bludgeoning stuff. Absolutely love that track. Thrones of Blood is my personal favourite from this album. Depths of Depravity, crushing stuff, some killer riffs and really good guitar work. Torn into Enthrallment is an interesting one because it has quite a sort of gentle intro. We have another version of Synthetically Revived as well. And we've also got a re-recording of Breeding the Spawn as well. So hopefully you can see that. Really dark, really sinister artwork as well. It's just a great album. This is a really bludgeoning death metal album. This is right up there with albums such as Tomb of the Mutilated, Once Upon the Cross as well. Those kind of albums that are seen as kind of benchmark US death metal albums. This is one of those. And I always, even though I'd never heard of it, I always kind of was aware, I knew that this was held in very high regard by a lot of people as being something really quite special. And I would say that it is, because it is a punishing death metal album. It's a bit longer than the previous two. It's about 45 minutes, I believe. But it's start to finish bludgeoning. Absolutely crushing stuff. As I say, there's a little bit of an evolution there. It does sound notably different from the first two albums. I think there's a bit of a musical maturity. They've obviously kind of learned and honed their skills over time, maybe. Not to say that those are inferior albums musician-wise, the previous two. But I would say that there is definitely a feel of maturity to this album. So that's Pierced from Within, which I also have in cassette form. Absolutely. So you can get all three of these from Listenable Records, and I bought them direct. As soon as I saw that these were becoming available, I absolutely had to have them. There was no chance I was going to miss out on that. Look at that. Glorious. And again, we have our full, lovely, high quality insert. Absolutely awesome stuff. Brilliant stuff. And this one was, of course, once again recorded by Scott Burns, or produced by Scott Burns, and Suffocation, engineered by Scott Burns at Morrisound Studios. So obviously they had learned from their mistake of trying something different with Breeding the Spawn, gone back to Scott Burns, and the resulting article is a fine piece of work. It is a fine example of brutal death metal done right. So now we have actually one of my favourite releases from Suffocation. It's not a full length, it's an EP. And it is entitled Despise the Sun. Now this is a reissue, a Butterfly with Splatter edition, limited to 900 copies, courtesy of I believe this was from the Nuclear Blast Records web store. It's got a revived different artwork there. Really cool. Pretty creepy stuff with the hand being dissolved by the sun there. But what is a real treat is that disc. Now you might think Butterfly with Splatter, that sounds a bit interesting. Well, it certainly is. I have not got another record in my collection that looks like this. Very freaking cool. and it does look a little bit like butterfly wings, I suppose. Why? I don't know why they've chosen to go with this kind of colour scheme, but it's really cool. And this is an absolutely amazing release, no doubt about it. It's only 5 tracks long, but the very fact that it opens with the track Funeral Inception, that is all that I need to know. That one track is an absolute bulldozer. It's so groovy, it's so crushingly heavy, it's just got it all. It's absolutely amazing. It's one of Suffocation's most popular songs, I know, but it is an absolute benchmark, absolutely amazing. It's that chorus, God forbid, God forbidden. That is so memorable and catchy. Death metal, brutal death metal with a catchy chorus is not something that you come across all that often, but this is freaking great. Other particularly awesome tracks, we've got the recording of Catatonia, re-recording Catatonia, which closed out the EP. We've got Devoid of Truth as well. The title track, Despise the Sun. Even Blood Churn, start to finish. This is only sort of 20 minutes long, I think. Start to finish, this is a masterpiece. This is Suffocation, back on top, absolutely on fine form. Only 5 tracks, but 5 absolutely essential tracks. This is a starting point recommendation. If you'd never heard of Suffocation before, I would say easily check this out. This will get you hooked. Amazing vocals, monstrous vocals, killer riffs, brilliant intricacy. It's just great. Despise the Sun, absolutely freaking awesome. So that's all my vinyl and that's all my cassettes. However, there are a couple more articles which I will just briefly take you through, just because they're still quite difficult to get hold of these days. We have a CD copy of their full-length album Blood Oath from 2009, which does have awesome artwork. The lineup has again changed a little bit because we've got Frank Mullen on vocals, we've got Guy Marchias on guitars, Terence Hobbs on guitars, Derek Boyer on bass, who's an absolutely phenomenal bassist. That guy's bass tone is so prominent, and I love to be able to hear the bass. I think that it really needs to be brought to the foreground, or at least kind of be audibly visible, unlike some bands that really just let the bass get lost in the mix. Suffocation always keep it nice and prominent, but Derek Boyer is a brilliant bassist, and then we've got Mike Smith on drums as well. So this album, absolutely freaking awesome. I would say that this is a really strong album. However, I would not say that it's nearly as aggressive as or extreme as what they have done previously or what has been released from the band subsequently. I would say that this is leaning a lot more in the sort of technical and progressive direction, but it is still Suffocation. It's instantly recognisable as Suffocation, but it's quite progressive. It's very technical and intricate. Some of the riffs are absolutely fantastic. The guitar work is faultless, of course, but it doesn't quite have the same pummeling aggression as, say, for example, the album that followed, or Pierced From Within, even. And talking about what comes after, from 2013, we have Pinnacle of Bedlam. So I've got the CD form here. What can I say about this album? This is a very interesting one. This is a freaking great album. This is very extreme. I would say this is a pummeling album. Certainly when you take tracks such as Cycles of Suffering, the opening track, which just bludgeons in, blast beats, Frank's just guttural, bestial vocals, those crushing riffs. Purgatorial Punishment, As Grace Descends, which is furious. Sullen Days, with its interesting little intro piece. My Demise, Rapture of Invocation, and we've got a re-recording of Beginning of Sorrow as well. It's not an overly long album, it's just a bludgeoning album. It is quite technical, there is a lot of technicality in there, intricate little details, but the riffs are killer, the vocals are killer. This is Suffocation. This is instantly definable, recognisable Suffocation. Pinnacle of Bedlam, an absolutely cracking album. If you like more modern sort of technical death metal, if you like bands such as Cryptopsy, for example, or Inherit Disease, Condemned. That's the kind of technicality that I'm talking about here. You'll definitely be able to appreciate Suffocation in their more modern incarnations. Definitely be able to appreciate Pinnacle of Bedlam. An absolutely superb album. So there we have it. That's my Suffocation bundle. Just to recap in reverse order. 2013 in CD format here, we have Pinnacle of Bedlam, tracks that you absolutely must check out. Cycles of Suffering, As Grace Descends, and Sullen Days. Then we've got, from 2009, we have Blood Oath. Not quite as extreme as Pinnacle of Bedlam, not quite as extreme as Pierced From Within, but certainly a very good album. Tracks to check out would be the title track, Blood Oath, Dismal Dream, and Come Hell or High Priest, which is awesome. The absolutely glorious Despise the Sun. I freaking love this. What can I say about it? It's just a death metal masterpiece. This is notably less technical and less intricate than Blood Oath and Pinnacle of Bedlam, for example. I would say this is more akin to the kind of the brutal, groovy death metal of Effigies of the Forgotten and Breeding the Spawn. So this is definitely one for those of you who like crushing, groovy riffs. Check out Funeral Inception. It is an absolutely essential track. Also check out Devoid of Truth and the re-recording of Catatonia. Despise the Sun. Freaking awesome. Then we've got, in this glorious little tape form, Pierced From Within from 1995, and on glorious vinyl here. Awesome album. Check out Pierced From Within. Check out Thrones of Blood. Check out Brood of Hatred as well. That's another particularly good moment there. Then we've got Breeding the Spawn, the album which is criticised unjustly, but it's actually just a really quite a good staple old school death metal album. Brutal old school death metal album. Particular highlights from this album would include Beginning of Sorrow, Breeding the Spawn, and Marital Decimation. Then we've got the debut, Effigy of the Forgotten. An absolutely masterful album in both vinyl and cassette formats. So freaking cool. Absolutely love the case on that. Really does look the part. Creepy as hell. Amazing album, absolutely legendary. Check out Liege of Inveracity. Check out Infecting the Crypts. And check out Mass Obliteration, I should say. Awesome, awesome stuff. Then, of course, we've got the EP, Human Waste. A good one. Definitely, it's one for the diehards, yes. But if you just like old school death metal, check it out. Check it out. Check out this version of Infecting the Crypts and Synthetically Revived, because it is well worth it. And then we've got the Live Killer, which again, not going to go into too much detail on, but we've got live in North America on all three formats. So, thank you very much for watching, my friends. What are your thoughts and opinions on Suffocation? What are your thoughts and opinions on these particular articles? Have you also got these albums in these same formats? Have you got these nice colourful vinyls? Have you got these beautiful cassette reissues? Let me know. I'm very interested to hear the thoughts and opinions of others as always. Feel free to contribute. Feel free to like and subscribe as well, of course, my friends. It's very, very much appreciated. We're generating a real underground following here, which is really, really freaking cool. And I'm very grateful to everyone, of course, for that. Take care, my friends. Check back soon for more reviews and recommendations. And stay heavy.